I think I don't know if it's so much a case of going elsewhere and saying, well, I want to win there. I mean, they want to win, although you could certainly say Terrell Suggs, it's strictly about going home because the Arizona Cardinals aren't winning this year. But we talked so much last year about this defense being greater than the sum of its parts. You just mentioned Wink Martindale and all of the pre-snap deception and how this thing was calibrated so well. And when you take one piece out of that equation, you wonder what impact it has. But now, when you're talking about two, regardless of how you felt about Eric Weddle and Terrell Suggs' individual play at this stage of their career, you're talking about individual players with so much institutional knowledge, savvy types, experience, intangibles, and then you throw C.J. Mosley into that equation as well. It is tough, and in the case of Suggs, I can tell you he wasn't, he was disappointed in how things played out with Joe Flacco last year. Not so much that he disagreed with it, but that was the quarterback that won him a Super Bowl. And, he saw Eric Weddle walk out the door as well. And, from what I understand, there was a difference of opinion, the Ravens' value for him and what he thought he was worth. So was there a little bit of, I don't know if bitterness would be the right word, but was there a little bit of frustration there? And also maybe looking at this offense and saying, I don't know if we're ready to win a Super Bowl in year 17 for me being here, that maybe the thought of him going home seemed more appealing at that point. So, certainly you can look at what Weddle did and say, okay, he's got a chance to win a Super Bowl this year. Do I put the Jets in that category? No, I don't. Until Tom Brady retires, I don't. But the Jets are certainly positioned to be better over the next couple of years if Sam Darnold develops, and that's a big if at this point. So, it's kind of tough to kind of classify it as the Ravens right now being a destination where you say they're in it to win it right now in 2019. Now, they add Le'Veon Bell, and they hit a couple home runs in the draft, and they add a couple more good value free agents. Maybe we're singing a different tune come September, but it's tough to look at this roster right now, look at the holes on both sides of the ball, and feel overly confident about the Ravens' chances in 2019. And that's a tough deal for Lamar Jackson as well. We're talking about a young quarterback who, he needs help around him, and that also includes.
He's going to come back. He's going to come back on the field with sevens up a little bit more often than he was accustomed to the first 8 or 10 weeks of his career. That's
probably,
for sure.
Probably. Like I said, unless if the Ravens hit a couple home runs in the draft, or they go out and make a couple,
or Tyus Bowser turns out to be a late bloomer, right?
Yeah. Let's. I want to be very clear here. It's not as though this defense is devoid of talent suddenly, but is the talent level good enough among the young players to overcome the three guys that they've lost on a number of levels? C.J. Mosley on play, experience inside, Weddle's experience on the back end, Suggs' experience knowing the defense in and out and what he's provided. But you just look at some of the in-house replacements, and safety, I'm not convinced there. Outside linebacker, I'm sure as heck not convinced there. Inside linebacker, I like Kenny Young and Patrick Owasso, but those two combined didn't play as many snaps as C.J. Mosley last year. So what does that tell you as far as where they are in their career path? So it's a lot of question marks here, and you can fully be on board with any one of these moves from a standpoint of saying, I didn't agree with paying. Not
worth it, right? Too old.
And that's there's validity to that.
But then you got to go play.
But you have to play, right? You have to replace them. We've talked about this over and over and over. Anytime the Ravens have let a good player walk out the door who was overpaid and may have even gone elsewhere and was never as good. And how many times have we seen that?
Well, Anquan Bolden is the outlier, right? He's the guy that went somewhere that year, and we all cried for a year or two, and he caught some balls with Colin Kaepernick, by the way. That was the one guy. I mean, Adelis Thomas, Bart Scott. We can go through the names of the guys who got big money that left. All the linemen over the last couple of years, right? Like, I don't know that you would miss one of those guys, but let's say John Ogden had slipped out the side door back in 99 or 2000, or that Ray Lewis would have taken the piss with Art Modell at one point and left and just said, I'm done. I don't want to be there anymore. I don't want to be 4-12 anymore. Those guys felt that way in the beginning of their career, but Ozzie figured this out. The organization figured it out. Billick figured it out. Rod Woodson and Sam Adams and Shannon Sharp signing here began this era where every year they'd plug in I'm trying to think, Trevor Price or the guy, Anquan Bolden, that they could bring in veteran guys, Derek Mason, any of those guys.
Sure. I
don't know that they're attractive to a lot of those guys right now because Ray Lewis isn't here and Terrell Suggs isn't here and Ed Reed isn't here and Joe Flacco isn't here. So for Matt Burke was another guy. I mean, I'm just going through all of these hall of really good players. Eric Weddle coming here at that point in his career. I mean, the Ravens have really squeezed the juice out of good free agents, hall of very good free agents, paying them good, legitimate money and making it work. Now, what that means over the next 2-3 weeks here to acquire football players of that ilk, I don't know. I don't think they should go giving Le'Veon Bell $15 million. I really don't believe that.
Yeah, and that's where you kind of go back to what I mentioned a few minutes ago, where is this team rebuilding? And
transitioning, that's the new word. Transitioning,
reloading, whatever you want to call it. I mean, it's something. I don't think you necessarily lose 3 players the caliber of the 3 that they just let walk out the door on their defense.
And then go say you're going to beat Tom Brady.
And just say you're fine. You know what I mean? Like, it's fine to say that Eric Weddle's not right at that cost. It's fine to say Terrell Suggs, we love you, but we're not going above our number when you're going to be 37 in October. It's fine to say you don't want to pay C.J. Mosley $17 million a year and make him the highest paid inside linebacker in NFL history. I'm fine with saying each of those things, but don't tell me that it's not substantial and significant that you've lost those 3 individuals. When you're talking about a defense that, how many times last year did we say the sum was greater than the parts, and it was just really well calibrated and well disguised in the pre-snap movement, and it just was very organized, and it just was clicking. The veterans had a big part to do with that. Now, I'll say this much, Nestor, and we talked about this plenty of times. I also was very much leery of the Ravens going too far to try to keep this group intact because of what I just mentioned with some of the age.
Well, dude, this really speaks to the fact that we weren't in Indianapolis last week running around watching everywhere the coaches do. This year it's a Jets, next year it's a Cardinals. The Ravens don't have that. So in DeCosta and Harbaugh, they have 2 very safe executives right now, as safe as they're ever going to be. They both have fresh ink, fresh deals, fresh lease on life, fresh quarterback, fresh start. And when they get together down in Jupiter last month and they're like, we're not going all in on Suggs and Weddle and Mosley to put ourselves in a situation where we're not available to make our team better next year and the year beyond when Lamar Jackson might be ready to win as, an old guy, like a 24, 25-year-old quarterback. You know what I mean? Like when he gets to be old like that, we want to have our best team available, and that's very difficult for the fan base. It's very difficult for them, as I keep showing. I got to get my hands on my invoice here, my $1,500 PSL invoice. Here it is right here, PSL owner. I'll hold that up for the camera because I get this. And when this thing comes, someone has to pay this, right? And and I guess that's kind of all part of the deal, right? Like, and when I'm paying for this, am I saying, are we a 5 or 6 win team? What kind of team are we going to have here? And between now and the draft, they're going to get beaten up a lot. Because I don't think they're going to sign Le'Veon, but I don't think they're going to bring some player in here, Hall of Very good player with his head on a helmet and say, look, we made the team better at this point. I don't think there's any of that. There's no great hope out there for a player once you've lost Mosley, Suggs, Weddle, and Flacco in one offseason, right?
Well, I mean, they have money to spend, though. They really do, and there are still some really good players out there. Now, Is there a future Hall of Famer out there? I mean, are the Ravens going to pony up to pay that kind of money to get a Le'Veon Bell? I mean, I don't know. I think it's possible. I don't know what that means in terms of improving people's hopes for this year, but I think there very much is an argument to be made here with the Ravens saying goodbye to the individuals that they have, that this becomes very much a situation of what are we doing our absolute best just for 2019, or are we making decisions with the thought that 2020, 2021, 2022 are going to be our best chances to win with Lamar Jackson? So let's make moves with that in mind. And that's not to say you're completely punting on this season and you're going to go 2-14 or anything crazy like that. There's still lots of talent on this football team, but it is to say that are you going to be eager, more urgent, more desperate to fill those holes with short-term solutions, meaning you add a couple more veteran types, or are you aiming for some younger guys who, project a little bit more? You take some other team's 26-year-old with the thought that, okay, we think this guy can thrive in our system and has been pretty good at this spot, but he can be really good here over the next 3-4 years. Do you have that kind of a thought process? Because right now you look at this defense. I mean, who are the veteran leaders on this defense right now? It's Brandon Williams. Okay, fine, no problem there. Jimmy Smith's in the final year of his contract. Brandon Carr isn't exactly a long-term option. So you're kind of looking at Tony Jefferson. I mean, this is new territory for the Ravens. And again, even to sit here and say that I can't argue against any of the three outcomes here with Suggs, Weddle, and Mosley, knowing how it played out, knowing the money that Mosley got specifically. But I can't sit here and just say, even though I understand that, even though I agree with those moves, that it's not going to have a negative impact on this football team. So they have a heck of a lot of work to do. They have a ton of holes to fill, and you only have so much money. You only have so many draft picks. I mean, those are finite resources, and as it stands now, the Ravens are going to go into at least training camp with some pretty significant questions to be answered. And look, you hope that a few young guys take a step forward, and that's happened in the past. And when it does, they end up being fine. But when it doesn't, then you end up struggling a little bit more at some spots. So it's just this very much has a feel of hold on tight, because this could go a lot of different directions. And I certainly can understand some trepidation, quite frankly, even if you understand and agree with the way that this played out with Suggs, Mosley, and Weddle.
Now I know how the poor Nationals fans felt when Bryce signed with the Phillies. He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke, out on Twitter, and Luke at WNST.net. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends. We have a new sponsor here, Hammer and Nails, grooming for guys. It's out in Owings Mills. I got a hair chop out there, as well as a sports pedicure. It was pretty cool, man. Great place right on the town center in Owings Mills. Get out to hammerandnailsgrooming.com. Learn more if you're out in Owings Mills. They have also have the library there as part of the subway stop. But right on the town square, great new. You get your hair cut. There's a club you can join to get your hair cut every week there if you wish. They give you an adult beverage. Take good care of you. It's hammerandnailsgrooming.com. But stop and see them out in Owings Mills when you're there. Also brought to you by our friends at Lightbridge Health Sports Medicine Institute. All my Owings Mills sponsors today. I should get Owings Mills some love today. Dr. Kevin Crutchfield's going to be here this week. Dr. Craig Bennett actually saw my wife this week for an orthopedic need. My wife's having a little shoulder issue right now as part of her aftercare and cancer, and she's on the treadmill, and Lightbridge is trying to help her get ready to do a half marathon this year. They're doing stuff around town, too. Cal Ripken and Brad Jackson doing a thing with the JCC this week. Lightbridge is everywhere, but the Lightbridge Health Sports Medicine Institute, a state-of-the-art facility right in Owings Mills, and you've seen Cal up on the billboards. Get on out there. Support them. They are supporting us. Also, Strategic Factory, while I'm on all of my Owings Mills sponsors. Strategic Factory makes hats like this and shirts like this and cups like this, but they give you the strategy behind it to create your masterpiece and help you brand your company. I'm branding Baltimore positive this year through our friends at Strategic Factory, so I'll be getting some printed stuff I need some new business cards, too. So if you see Keith Miller, tell him I said hello. Say, Nestor needs some business cards, but not the thick ones because they don't fit in the wallet. Keith taught me about that. Also, our friends at the Modell Lyric. Check out the website for everything that's going on there. Joe Bonamassa this week. Got to remind everybody about that. The Doobie Brothers on April the 12th, and we had Tom Johnston from the Doobie Brothers on the program talking about the China Grove. Britt Floyd May 2nd, Frank Zappa hologram on May 3rd, and Bill Maher on June 9. There is always magic at the Modell Lyric. Luke Jones is joining us here. Luke, we've talked so much about CJ. We'll talk more about CJ. It's obviously a dark day, but overshadowed in all of this is a guy who would never want to be overshadowed, who was always overshadowed, who was always looking for shadows and doing his WWE routine and trying to be Ray Lewis and trying to be a movie star and trying to be a baller and a rapper and all that. And I tweeted out, because I think anyone that knows me knows Terrell Suggs was not my favorite Raven, probably the exact opposite through the years. I was not a fan of Terrell Suggs, the human being, even if I was a fan of Terrell Suggs, the athlete who tried hard and all that stuff. Just not my favorite dude. But I tweeted out deuces, and I always thought he was like saying peace, goodbye, and that's what I thought. So when I put up deuces to him, I wasn't being disrespectful. It was more of a peace, dude. Go to Phoenix, do what you always wanted to do. But it will be a much, much different locker room, a much, much different franchise without Terrell Suggs there to be whatever he was, dude. It wasn't my gig. It wasn't my act. I didn't take to it. He was never a guy I wanted to have dinner with after the second or third year. I never invited him out to do a show with me because I never figured he would show up even if he said he was going to show up. So he just wasn't my kind of guy, but there was a noise about him that from a football perspective, I guess it worked as a WWE character, right?
Well, and the character aside, he was a great
he was a great player. I'm not taking that. I've already said he will get my vote for the Hall of Fame, and if I'm the Hall of Fame presenter, I will present him as a guy that should be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I'm not distracting from the football player. I just think I don't think the fans really understand what he was all about. Like, you and I witnessed it. I witnessed it twice as long as you've witnessed it. Now that you think about it, you've been around a decade. And you didn't witness him when he was 22. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I'd like to say he's grown up some, and I think we could all acknowledge that. I think he'd like you to think he's the dumbest guy in the room, but he's not. No. You know what I mean? He likes to play that, I'm dumb, I'm from the hood and all. He's not. I mean, there's always an act. I don't know that I've ever had a normal conversation with the guy. That's the weirdest part about it. But I know around the building, he's had normal conversations with everybody but us. It's going to be a lot more quiet without him. I mean, I guess that's just my point. My point is I don't think the fans who haven't stood in that locker room for hours upon hours upon hours like you and I have to understand he was a little bit of a force of nature for good or evil depending on who you ask, right?
Sure. And I mean, let's face it, Nestor, this isn't the end of an era. He was the last remaining member of the old guard of great Ravens defense. And that's not to say the Ravens won't have great defenses in the future, but we know that the definition of a great defense has changed. I mean, we've debated it. We debated it all last year with a team that was in the top 3 in just about every defensive category last year, and yet there were still people saying, this defense stinks. Well, no, it doesn't. It's really, really good. It's just what constitutes a really good defense in 2018, 2019 is different than what it was in 2006 or 2003 or 2000. And Nestor, this will be the first Ravens football team that does not have Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, or Terrell Suggs on the roster. Think about that for a moment. I mean, this is the end of an era. And look, Terrell Suggs didn't have a whole lot left. He had 1.5 sacks over the last 9 games of last season. But again, what he brings from an intangible standpoint, leadership, as you coined it, institutional knowledge, I think that's another loss. And to your point, the presence that he was in the locker room, the presence that he was in meeting rooms, for as much as he wanted to be perceived as a clown, especially when he was younger, this is a guy who absolutely picked up study habits of Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and became a student of the game to the point where I know even members of the secondary.
Well, this is the way Ray did it, is something he could say, and no one else could say that anymore, right?
Right. I mean, so it's it really is the end of an era. And again, I mean, Terrell Suggs, what's he going to bring to the Arizona Cardinals at age 37 in 2019?
A lot of music, a lot of cursing. Yeah, we bring a lot of that into the locker room.
He probably will play well early in the season, and we've seen him kind of fade the last couple of years just because, hey, it's not normal for someone in their mid to late 30s to be playing in the NFL. I mean, that's an anomaly. Ray Lewis was an anomaly. Ed Reed didn't last nearly that long as an effective player. So I think from that standpoint, there's certainly some sentimental feelings that aren't there with Weddle or even with C.J. Mosley, for that matter, when you're talking about a guy who spent 16 years in Baltimore, a guy who was one season shy of matching Ray Lewis. I mean, think about that in terms of longest tenured Raven. So he'll be missed, but I think be remiss, if not to mention some of his off-field transgressions that wouldn't have held up,
I have no problem believing the bleach story, none. I mean, it would not feel completely out of character to me. So therefore, look, dude, you and I have had many chats. I've had many chats with John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta and Kevin Byrne and, over 20 years of what I thought of Terrell Suggs. And, let him go to Arizona. God bless him, and I'll see him in Canton, Ohio at some point.
Sure, absolutely. And, I mean, he's certainly someone who's one of the all-time greats in the history of this franchise. I mean, it's in some order: Jonathan Ogden, Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, and then Terrell Suggs fourth. I mean, that's kind of where I see it ranking. So he's going to be Ring of Honor. He's someone who I don't know if he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I'd be skeptical to put him in that territory. But I think over the last couple of years, he's cemented a legacy that is probably going to get him in the Hall of Fame at some point in time. And as I put on Twitter on Monday night when the news came out that he was not going to be returning to the Ravens, he saw, he was one season shy of matching Ray Lewis, but he also saw Ed Reed walk out the door and finish his career elsewhere. It's part of the business. I don't think it tarnishes his legacy, just in the same way that in hindsight, Ed Reed going to Houston really wasn't a big deal. It feels like it at the time, and certainly you miss the player and their presence and experience and intangibles they bring. But
Suggs is going to wake up in his own bed and go to work for 16 weeks and, probably call it a day. He might have another year in him. He might be able to squeeze another, $6-8 million out of this thing at the end, right?
Who knows? I mean, right. I mean, God bless him. I mean, get as much as you can. I mean, because we see, so many of these deals that are signed Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of this week, 2 weeks or 2 years from now, these guys will be free agents again, because we know that those contracts beyond the guaranteed money aren't worth the paper.
Or Coleccio Semele will be dealt off to the Jets.
Yeah. So from that standpoint, I mean, Terrell Suggs, and if you recall, Nestor, and you would know this better than I would, because I just followed it from afar. Terrell Suggs was hurt that the Arizona Cardinals didn't, they didn't take him when he came out at Arizona State. He was an Arizona guy. He wanted to. If there was a possibility of the Cardinals drafting him, he wanted that to happen, and it didn't, and that hurt him.
Probably when the baseball bats were chasing people around the gym, that probably precluded them from selecting him at that point.
Fair enough.
That's how he dropped. I mean, the fact that he was ever a Raven, like when the story is told, and I know I wrote about it in Purple Rain too, one of those miraculous, weird, never to be returned again nights on the draft board. Literally, right? It was a wild scene how he ever became a Raven, because I don't know that the Ravens ever took him seriously because they never thought he'd be on the board.
Sure. Well, remember, he put on some weight for the combine to be a D-end, and his testing was, as much as we were dwelling on Orlando Brown last year, Suggs, he had, maybe not to that dramatic degree, but he had a rough combine. He had rough testing. And
he had a rough everything that spring, as I remember, right?
Sure. So, I mean, you're talking about a guy that was he should have been a top 2 or 3 pick. I mean, that was the Carson Palmer year.
He's a Hall of Famer. I mean, you would look back a decade and a half later. I mean, there's no mistake in the football player he was. Probably like the kid with the weed gas mask, Tunzel.
Sure.
He fell down the board. Randy Moss is in the Hall of Fame for smoking a J, right? Literally, right? And that's
sure. So
that's where it is.
So from that standpoint, he was definitely disappointed. I think the Cardinals traded down in that draft, if I remember off the top of my head, but he gets to play at home. It certainly isn't chasing a ring. You're not doing that in Arizona at this point, but if that was the choice he wanted to make, and like I said, I think there was very similar to Ed Reed. There was a very clear difference in what he perceived his value to be and what the Ravens perceived it to be, and that's fine, but definitely it's always disappointing when someone who's been with the franchise that long isn't going to finish up his career. Do I think it puts a major blemish on his legacy? No. He could have enhanced his legacy, but I think his legacy will be just fine. And again, say what you want about him, like him or not, heck of a player, and the Ravens there's something they'll certainly miss about having Terrell Suggs in the building that they're not going to have anymore.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at the Lee Tessier team, Baltimore's premier realty team, and the folks I trust with my real estate transaction. Lee is up in Harford County, but he can help you anywhere. Got a great team. Tim's my realtor, doing a great job. Lee Tessier, that's TESSIER.com to learn more there. Also, our friends at Cole Roofing, sponsor of our community and charity series. Been there 100 years. Don't let it goof on your roof. If you've got a commercial workspace, I mean, this is a good time of the year with the rain's about to come and getting into April here. Get your roof checked out. Also, Gordian Energy there with a knot to potentially teach you about solar and capturing the sun to save you a lot of money long term. If you interested in that kind of thing, Cole Roofing, that's what they do. Find Bill Cole out online or listen to him here at WNST. King Discount Liquors, lottery, beer, booze, and the best prices in Baltimore. Get on out to Rosedale. Give the King a ring. Want to remind everybody, April 28th, big-time bull roast. I'm involved in this. Victor T's involved, so you know the music's going to be good. We're going to be out in Timonium with that. I'll be telling you more about that. But get on out to Rosedale. Give the King a ring. Johnny Bev and the King All-Stars always taking good care of me. One other place they take great care of me is Al's Seafood in Essex. I've been getting crabs and crab cakes there since I was a little boy. I was in the other day. Let's see. Chad mixed me up some shrimp with onions and Old Bay, and then I had a half dozen oysters. Shucked those. I had a cocktail. You probably didn't see that online. And then I bring some scallops home for my wife. It's a lovely thing. Al's Seafood, carrying them out, bringing in the crabs, getting you ready for spring and summer since the 1970s. Been there 50 years, Al's Seafood in Essex. Luke has been doing it not quite 50 years, but almost 40 years. I've been doing it 50 years, and it's almost 30 years here now in sports radio. It's been 27 and a half years. It's crazy. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I am on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram. And in all of the years we've been doing it, very rarely have we had days talking about the loss of C.J. Mosley and Terrell Suggs and the Ravens maybe rebuilding. We'll be talking more about that in the days and weeks ahead, but a crazy week of free agency here in Baltimore. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.